we're used to having plants that are in soil, so you could just stick your finger into the soil, but it's a little different with the bark. So how do you determine when the best time to water the plant is?
Well, with orchids, you want to look at the root of it. And when the root turns silver, that's when you want to water it. But you want to make sure that.
Welcome to the Stand with Nature's very first inaugural podcast. This is super exciting. We are going to be interviewing lots of really wonderful plant people, everything from authors to plant enthusiasts to growers, anything and everything plants, both indoor and outdoor. And today I'm excited because we are going to get to speak with Thuy Tran, and she really enjoys indoor and outdoor plants and has really got into orchids, her and her husband, Tony. And we're going to be speaking with them today about mostly the orchids, but also some other really wonderful things related to plants in their house. So first off, my name's Kim. I'm your plant bestie, and I'd like to introduce Twee. Welcome to the show. Thanks so much for coming. Appreciate it.
Hi, my name is Twee, and thank you for having me.
Sure. So how did you originally get into plants? Have you loved plants since you were a child, or did you have a family member that was into plants that got you excited about it when you were younger?
My dad, he loved plants. I mean, our house just surrounded with plants, flowers and fruit trees. And then when I got married, my husband is too. So that's how I got to like them.
You married back into plants.
Yes.
Was your dad into indoor and outdoor plants, or did he like more outdoor plants?
Both actually. We have plants
That's awesome.
throughout the house.
Okay. And what kind of plants did you really like when you were a kid? What did you enjoy watching your dad grow?
Actually, I like varieties, but the one that really stay with me is the bougainvillea. Is
Oh yeah.
it's practically flowering, throughout the years.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, those are really pretty. They're all over San Diego. You can't miss one. They're all over the place.
Yes.
Okay. And your husband and you both really enjoy orchids. How did you guys get into orchids specifically?
Well, we got into it actually because we got gifts um, uh, as plants, and then we found out that it's lasts a long time, at least a couple months if you take care of it.
Mm-hmm. And then you just kept getting more and more into it, and now you have a backyard full of
Yeah.
orchids you're waiting to bloom, right?
Yes,
That's
yes.
awesome. Okay. What would you say is one of your favorite types of orchids and why?
Actually, I like variety. Just this is one of them. Is depend on the soil. Sometimes it give
Mhm.
you, a darker color,
Uh-huh.
but um, this is one of them. I just love it, and it does have fragrant to it,
Oh,
so it
nice.
smells really nice. So
Uh-huh. Okay, great. So you probably have a bunch of varieties right now, and it's kind of
yes,
nice because you always have different flowers to look forward to throughout the year, huh?
right. This is what they call the slipper orchid.
Oh, okay. That's
So
really
that's
pretty.
one
I
of them.
like how it pops because the center is so vibrant.
Yes, it
It's
is.
really, and
And then
I've never seen an orchid with leaves that are so thin. That's unusual.
yes, yes, this is one of them. Some of them is a little bit bigger, but
Yeah,
they're beautiful. So we enjoy it a lot. So
that's awesome. Okay. Um, what would you say is, I know there's a lot of people that are really interested in orchids and they love how beautiful they are, but it's kind of scary and overwhelming when you're first getting into a certain type of plant. Is there a particular variety of orchid that you would recommend for beginners to try out first before they get more advanced types of orchids?
well, I believe the moth orchids is the easiest to grow. And they mostly commonly found in the markets around here, Trader Joe's and all of them, they carry a lot of them. And, it's not too expensive for a beginner to get into.
Yeah. And they have lots of colors too, which is nice. There's always different colors of that one.
Exactly. Yes.
Right. Okay. What can you kind of give an idea of what the best type of lighting is? Because we all know if you put it in a bad spot, any type of plant where it's not getting the right light, that really impacts the plant negatively. So for most orchids, what would you say is the ideal light placement in the house?
Well, they need indirect light, indirect sunlight. So, but it doesn't need the brightness. So, you just put it in the area. It's not in direct sunlight, then it will do a lot better. Because too much sunlight, it will burn the leaves.
Okay. Let's see. And I've heard that your husband Tony is pretty much the Mr. Miyagi of plant rescuing when it comes to orchids.
Yes,
He's
yes,
the orchid whisperer. So how did this all start? Did people just start dropping orchids off on your guys' front porch?
Well, what happened is that, oh, actually, I keep watering. I soak the plants in water, and that's how it killed the orchid right away. So, so that's the reason why he started getting into it to try and figure it out the way, and that's how we find out that we should never water too much.
Yeah, so you were the first muse for his journey of orchid caretaking. You drowned the
Correct.
first one, so that's how you figured it out.
Correct.
It
Yes.
takes teamwork, right? That
Right.
someone's
Right.
got
Right.
to mess it up so you can learn. That's great. Yeah, I know a big problem like you did. A lot of people overwater their orchids and they just don't know. And I
Right.
think it's just something that it's not really necessarily the person's fault, because a lot of times, you'll get the moth orchids at the grocery stores and they'll come in these really cute pots, but a lot of
Right.
times they don't have drainage and they don't have
Right.
aeration, and
Right.
they're usually sometimes they're even put into soil, which is not what the orchid is naturally in, right? What kind of soil, or not soil, but what kind of substrate do you guys use for your orchids?
Well, he usually used the bark and just
Mm-hmm.
covered around the plants,
Mm-hmm.
and we would never water the leaves at all. Just keep it down below so it doesn't
Mm-hmm.
ruin the leaves, and that's how you
Mm-hmm.
can kill the orchid that way.
So when you water or like too close to the leaf base, that probably splashes up onto the leaves and can cause mold or other stuff like that, huh?
Correct. Yes. Yes. It'll kill. It's a sure way to kill it if the water stay in between these and it
Mm-hmm.
can't drain, then it will the leaves will start turning yellow and die.
It's interesting that you say to not put water between that, because a lot of times you'll see these hacks online where it'll say put an ice cube into the orchid and that's how you can water it. And I'm just like, that doesn't sound like a good idea, because you're putting like ice cold water right onto like the base of the plant and it's sitting there, drenching it, and it's cold. Like that just that's probably not a good idea, right, for watering your orchid.
Well, you can do it, but as long as the ice, doesn't sit, too close in between these stem right here, you
Right.
see these, and that's where the water can stay right there for too long, and that is not a good idea.
Yeah, that's risky. Okay. As far as the bark that you all use, how often should you repot an orchid? Would you do it after the blooms fall off, or how often do you put new bark into it?
After the flowers falls off.
Okay. And then when the flowers come and fall off, it does it vary? Like, I know it's not going to be flowering all year round like a bougainvillea would. And so, how often should people expect an orchid to bloom in a year? Is it usually just once, or are there some varieties that bloom more than once?
Well, with this one here, just once a year. But like I said,
Mm-hmm.
it's last sometime we have it for almost like 3 to 4 months before it falls off.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So they last a long time.
Yes, it does.
Yeah. Yeah. Especially if you take good care of it and you're not putting it. I think that's another problem too. Some people might buy them from the grocery store when they're in full bloom, and then they don't know to put it in a certain spot with the proper light, or they don't know how to water it, and then they put it in shock. So that could certainly have your flowers drop off faster because you're not giving it the ideal, space and care that it needs. That's probably what happens to a lot of people when they get frustrated. So you guys know exactly what kind of light they need and how much water they need and all that kind of stuff, which makes a huge difference, I'm sure.
Yes, yes.
Okay. So when you're going to water your orchid, how do you know when it needs water? Because that could be a huge problem. I mean, number one, you want to make sure your planter has drainage and aeration, because if it doesn't, that could cause the root rot. But how do you know when exactly it needs water, especially since, a lot of times we're used to having plants that are in soil, so you could just stick your finger into the soil, but it's a little different with the bark. So how do you determine when the best time to water the plant is?
Well, with orchids, you want to look at the root of it. And when the root turns silver, that's when you want to water it. But you want to make sure that the water drain well. Um, just don't let it sit in the water. That's the main
Mhm.
thing.
Okay. And when you repot it, like how do you I've heard that with orchids, when you're repotting them, you want to make sure you put it into the right size pot, because I've heard if you put it into a pot that is a little bit too big, the water can collect around the roots and cause problems. And if it's too small, it can cause problems too. How do you determine when is a good time to repot an orchid and what size pot you should use?
Well, when the root come out too much, then you want it to be able to take the nutrients.
Mhm.
So that's when that's why you don't need to put in a bigger pot than the plant itself, because it just grown the root instead of feeding the flowers.
Mm-hmm. It's all about where the focus is and what you're trying to get the plant to do, like flowering versus new growth and stuff like that.
Right.
That makes sense. Okay. Um, let's see. So if someone, this is the other thing, you go to a grocery store and you get an orchid, say you get a moth orchid, you're super excited, you go home, you defeat the odds and put your moth orchid into a place where it has wonderful light, and you don't drown it to death, and you water it nice, and you get to enjoy those blooms for 3 months. And then the plant dies. And then you're like, I really want to make sure that I get this thing to flower again. What can people do to keep it alive and keep it happy and repot it so that it comes back again the following year? What are the steps they kind of have to go through to make sure that they have a high chance of getting it to bloom again the next year?
Well, what we do is that, we water it with the fertilizer also,
Mhm.
and just, take out all the dead flowers and cut it
Mhm.
down and reroot the root, and
Mhm.
just, we keep it in a well light area, and water it and just kind of watch it.
Mhm. And do you cut off the dead roots at all, or do you just leave the roots alone and only cut off the dead roots every couple of years?
Well, when you can tell when the root is no longer alive, then you
Mhm.
cut it off and just trim that off, and let the new one can absorb the nutrients so that it'll grow for you the next year.
Mhm. Okay. And when you're putting the bark into the planter, you kind of just would put your bark towards the bottom of the planter first. And then, because I know the roots of orchids are a lot more different than most of our roots that we deal with. So it's just kind of awkward to get it into the planters with the bark around it. Do you guys have a certain way that you do it to make sure that it's nice and, in there and there's not big gaps?
Well, mainly, you just put a little bit down the bottom and then just set the plants in there and then fill it up.
Okay. And just kind of work around the roots and stuff it in.
Yes, yes, yeah, just it will hold it.
Great. Okay. Let's see here. And then one other issue that people have sometimes, and this is probably related to shock, but you probably know a lot better than I do. They get to that point where they have their orchid and it's starting to get new flowers again, and they're real excited. And then the buds fall off before the flower opens. Why would that happen? Is there any reason why that would happen?
It's too much water. That's why it's not getting it. Because we don't have that much of a problem in regard to that. Because when it bloom, it's pretty much is go full bloom, and when it's time for it to fall off, then we can tell that it's folding and it's falling off. But I don't have any problem with the bud that coming out and just start falling off, unless it's the water issue that affecting the whole plants.
Yeah. And have you by chance noticed, just because you have a lot more orchids than most people do in their home, have you noticed that when it's producing flowers versus when it's kind of more dormant, does it require more water and fertilizer during one time or the other?
No. We keep it the same. It's mainly just when we would check out yearly and see if the root need to be cleaned out and repotted.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And then for watering, do you water just as much when the plant is dormant versus when it's starting to flower? Is there like an adjustment to the watering when that happens?
We don't. We just watch when most of the time when the plant is flowering like this, we don't do
Mhm.
much to it. Is when we repotting it, but watering we still keep it pretty much at the same schedule. We
Mhm.
check on it, and if it need to be watered, then we would water it, and fertilizer, at the same time.
Okay. And how often do you fertilize the orchids?
At our house here, normally, we it take up to probably 4 to 6 weeks before we have to do that, because is the root itself is stay moist, so we don't have to keep watering it that much.
Hmm. Okay. And what type of fertilizer do you use for the orchids?
Just
Do
just
you
the
use any
same
type
as
of
we just use the generic brand for orchids. So we just mix
Mhm.
it and just water it as we water. We don't.
So it's the liquid one, not like a slow release, it's a liquid fertilizer.
Correct, yeah. We
Cool.
just
Okay.
dilute it and then
Okay. How do you guys kind of combat or make sure that pests don't get into the plants? Do you have any kind of regimen for spraying anything onto the leaves? I've heard some people use different things that they spray onto the leaves to kind of preemptively make sure that pests don't attack it, or do you do anything like that for the leaves?
we don't do any of that. And as you can tell, our plant is pretty healthy. We don't have to use any kind of pesticide with our orchid. That's the one thing I like about it.
Mhm. That's awesome. And then do you keep all of them inside of your home or do you keep any outside? How do you guys handle that? Because you have how many orchids do you have? Do you have an idea of how many you have total?
Well, we have actually it's almost like not a greenhouse totally, because here in California you really don't need that. It's just on the outside, and we have the cover over it so to keep it the direct sunlight. And so probably about 30, 40. But inside the house,
Oh.
if it's blooming, we bring it into the house and we keep a few. That's it.
Okay. And are you continuing to add to your collection or have you tapped out and have the max amount of orchids that you'd like, or can you never have enough orchids in your house?
Well, anytime I see some different flowers. That's how it's attract me to orchids. It's the way, the type of flowers it's given and all that, then that's yeah, I'll get into it.
Yeah, yeah, it's a very, I don't know, I've known a few people that have really extensive orchid collections, and it's very addictive because all the flowers are so different and they have their own personality, like you're saying, like the variations of the color and shades can, be different, which makes it even more exciting because it's always changing. And then the other thing too, I mean, a lot of your plants are probably years old. Have you two gotten into splitting and propagating any of the orchids at all, or is
Yes,
that something?
yes, yes. My
Yes,
husband, my husband does that. Yes. See, when we repotting it, if it's coming out so much, then he'll repot it.
that's awesome. So where is it that you propagate the orchids? From what I understand, you can't just take the leaf, it has to have part of the root on it, and then do you get ones that are
Yes,
popping out, or?
yes, it does. From these, as you see this is a new one here that is coming
I see
out.
that, the little one to the side.
Yes,
So if you
So,
wanted to, when the flowers come off, you could propagate that one.
right, yes, Yep.
That's awesome.
So it's usually what we do it during spring. If there's new one that we want to propagate, then that's how we do it. You don't do it, just throughout the years. It just a certain time of the year during the spring that you do it.
Yeah, you kind of have like a routine and a schedule, so it's not so overwhelming,
Yeah.
and the same things are done at certain times of the year. You're just doing it 40 times for 40 plants. That's awesome. Okay. um so if someone has a plant and the leaves are looking good and they're getting new growth on the leaves, but it's been over a year and they're not getting any flowers, what are they doing wrong? Is there something they need to do to kind of encourage the flowers to form? Because I know a lot of times, the energy of the plant can either go toward the new growth of the leaves or the flowers. So is there anything that someone can do to kind of encourage the flowers to start forming if they haven't seen it in quite a while?
I haven't run into that problem because most of our, come well,
They just need to take it to your porch and leave a note and say,
yeah.
please make my plant flower. They need
Well,
to they need to leave it with your husband and he'll figure
I
it out.
know. Sorry. I felt because most of our plants, is does sometimes it not at the same time, but it does, coming up. Maybe some doesn't come out as many, but I think it's more of the fertilizer that they absorb.
Right. Okay. And have you noticed, because you have so many plants that are more established and older, have you noticed with particular plants every season that they bloom again and again? Do they get bigger or more flowers? Have you noticed they kind of get a little bit bigger at all, or?
No, it just all depends, and I believe is probably due to the temperature also. Some year when
Mhm.
it is the temperature fluctuates so much, then it doesn't give out as much flowers as it would be.
Mhm. Because the plant gets a little bit more stressed out, so it's not as
Yeah.
ideal as it would. Yeah,
Yes.
that makes a lot of
Mhm.
sense. Okay. So of all the orchids that your husband has rescued and revived from the brinks of death, is there a particular one that you looked at the plant and you were like, there's no way this thing is coming back. This thing looks like a goner, and then he brought it back? Or do you have an example of a plant that you could share with us that you were just amazed that it actually survived and was happy again down the road?
When we first start out with it, yes, there's a lot of them because I thought, okay, that's it. Um,
To
but
the trash can.
yes, yes, yes. I mean, we have to a few when we first start out.
Mhm.
But yep, he salvaged it. I don't know what he's, but he just start out from the beginning. Trim out all the bad leaves and the roots and all that, and start repotting it, and with the watering correctly, and it came back.
So when he goes through the process of taking off the dead roots and cutting off the leaves that are starting to turn yellow and not look good, and repotting it into a planter with the bark and everything, how long does it kind of take for the plant to start regaining its energy and coming back? Usually probably a couple months, right? It takes some time.
It does. It does. And usually we keep it outside with those plants. We usually keep it outside and keep it in the area where it's, the moisture and all of that, and not in direct sunlight,
Mhm.
for it to regrow.
Yeah, that's a good tip. That's a good tip, because I think a lot of people might get excited to, like, give their plant the full sunshine thinking that's going to help it, but that probably would put it into shock. It kind of needs a little bit more,
Yeah,
kind
nature.
of, I guess, the quiet area to
Yeah.
regain its strength and start to get a little bit, back to its healthy state.
Yeah.
Okay. Do you have any final words of advice for anybody that is really wanting to get into growing orchids, but they're just apprehensive and nervous about it? Any final words of advice that you could give them?
Well, it seems hard, but this is worth it when it's flowering, because it lasts for a long time. And the smell, I know a lot of people don't smell orchids, but some of them give out the best smell there is. One of them is have this chocolate smell to it, and we just love it whenever it's bloom.
Wow.
So
Yeah, that's a good point, because a lot of flowers that you buy that are cut flowers, you'll be lucky if they last a week. Like, and that's a good set of cut flowers. So this is the gift that keeps giving, because you'll have a bloom at least once a year. So that's wonderful, and it'll last a while.
Yep, it does last a
Yeah.
long time.
That's good motivation. And then one thing I did forget to ask is, when you're looking for planters, what kind of things are you looking for in a planter for orchids? Because I know there's certain things that plants need for different types of pots that would work best for them. Some of them need something that has really good airflow. Some of them need something that's really sturdy because it gets top heavy. What is it that you and your husband look for when you're trying to find really good planters for your orchids?
Well, the important thing is well drainage, and um, I like the look of it. I want a nice pot, but have the function that it provides for the orchid to thrive.
Mm-hmm. And then when you have the plants outside, you probably just keep them in like the clear plastic containers that have the good drainage. Now, when you bring them in, is that when you put them into the nice pots when they're getting ready to bloom, or how do you do that?
Yes, that's how I do it. On Sometime on the outside where I used to decorate, then I like a nice pot outside too. So to set in, it's only when I try to revive the orchid, that's when I would leave it in the plastic container.
Okay. And then, just for fun, what other plants do you have in your house that you really enjoy?
Well, actually, I got the cherry blossom, which is blooming beautifully now, right outside our door.
Nice.
And we have the well, that is the season right now. So we got a few, fruit trees, the pomegranates and the avocados and guava. So we have a few, and the star fruit. And
Oh, that's a fun one.
yeah, so we have a few.
So what season of the year do you look forward to the most in your garden outside?
Oh, the New Year's season, because that's when a lot of flowers are blooming. So so around February. So that's
Yeah.
yeah.
So right now is your favorite time for the garden.
Correct. Yes, it's beautiful.
That's
Yeah.
awesome. Great. Okay. Well, I really enjoyed speaking with you today, Twee. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me. And it was really fun getting to listen to you about all the knowledge your husband and yourself have gained about orchids, because orchids are certainly something that people need to get more information on, especially the beginners, because there's just basic stuff they can do to kill it when they don't even mean to. So I really appreciate it. And it was such a wonderful time talking to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Bye.